My name is Rachel Morgan, and 5 minutes before my life turned upside down, I was sitting in the glass-walled office I'd dreamed of since college, except it wasn't mine. Across the desk, my boss, Claire Donovan, adjusted her pearl earrings and slid my promotion portfolio to the side without even opening the cover. 5 years of weekends lost, birthdays skipped, and vacations canceled, all reduced to a 20-second glance and a polite smile that felt like a blade. "I've reviewed your application," she said, her tone cool and precise. "While your work has been adequate, I don't believe you're ready for senior leadership. Maybe in a year or two." Adequate. The word landed like a lead weight in my chest. I wanted to remind her that I'd doubled our largest account's revenue, that I'd built our client satisfaction scores to the highest in the region, that I'd been the one answering emergency calls at 2 a.m. while she was asleep. But years in corporate America had taught me the art of swallowing indignation whole. I smiled instead. "I understand. Thank you for your feedback." She nodded, already glancing at the time. "The Jensen proposal needs your attention today. They want new projections before signing." By the time I left her office, I was on autopilot, walking past the corner office that should have been mine, the gold nameplate that should have had my name etched in it. The fluorescent lights hummed above the air, smelled faintly of burnt coffee, and somewhere deep in my chest something hardened. In the elevator, my reflection stared back at me in the polished steel doors. I expected to see defeat. Instead, I saw calculation. This wasn't sadness or even anger. This was clarity. In that moment, two decisions formed as sharply as if I'd spoken them aloud. I would cancel the week-long beach trip I'd been planning for months, and I would stop creating the daily operational briefs that kept this company from falling into chaos. No one here realized it yet, but they were leaning on an invisible beam, and I was about to step away. I thought about the nights I'd stayed until midnight, rewriting client proposals, the mornings I'd arrived at dawn to prep Claire for meetings she barely skimmed the agenda for. I thought about the way my name was never in the recap emails, how the quarterly wins were always Claire's leadership, never my execution. And in that sterile elevator, I realized something powerful. If they couldn't see my worth, I'd let them feel my absence. By the time I reached the parking lot, the sun was hiding behind heavy gray clouds, the kind that promised rain without warning. I sat in my car for a long minute, hands gripping the steering wheel, running through the plan in my head. It was simple: stop being the safety net, the fixer, the silent problem solver. Do only what was written in my job description, no more. Some people might call it petty. I called it proof. Proof that adequate was the wrong word. Proof that without me, the gears wouldn't just slow, they'd grind to a halt. I started the car, the hum of the engine almost soothing. This wasn't resignation, this was preparation. My silence would speak louder than any argument I could make in that office. And before I tell you what happened when I put that plan into action, before I show you just how quickly a well-oiled machine can fall apart, I want to say something to you. If you've ever been overlooked, underpaid, or told to wait your turn while others leapfrog ahead, you know this feeling. You know that quiet rage that sits just under your skin, the one that demands you do something. If you've ever been there, if you've ever tasted that same bitter word adequate, leave a like and stay with me. Because what happened next didn't just change my career, it changed everything. The rain started just as I pulled out of the parking lot, fat drops tapping against the windshield in an irregular rhythm. I took the long way home, not because I needed the extra time to think my mind was already made up, but because I wanted to savor the shift that had just happened inside me. It was like someone had taken the blinders off, and suddenly I could see exactly how this game was played, and how I was going to win it. At home, I dropped my bag on the kitchen counter and pulled out my phone. First, I opened the travel app and canceled my beach reservation. The confirmation email pinged my inbox a few seconds later, the words, "Refund processed," staring back at me. That week wouldn't be for sunbathing anymore. It would be for watching the system buckle without me. Next came the operational briefs. For the past 5 years, I'd created a set of daily reports so detailed that anyone could step into my role for a day and not miss a beat. Every workflow mapped every client quirk, documented every deadline tracked down to the hour. Claire never asked for them. She simply expected them to be waiting in her inbox each morning, like coffee brewed itself. Not anymore. I closed the document I'd been updating and opened a blank one. The cursor blinked in the center of the page. I typed exactly 3 lines. Effective immediately, I will be focusing exclusively on tasks assigned directly to my role. For questions outside my scope, please contact the relevant department. I printed the note and taped it to the whiteboard next to my desk at work. No fanfare, no announcement, just a quiet line in the sand. The next morning, I walked into the office at exactly 9 a.m., the hum of conversation already swelling in the open floor plan. No 7:30 prep, no early bird sprint to get Claire's talking points ready. My desk felt strangely foreign when I sat down, as if the extra hour had shifted the air itself. At 9:15, Peter from accounting stopped by holding a folder like it might bite him. "Rachel, did you see the email about the Brighton account? The projections are off by 2 quarters. "Yes," I said without looking up from my monitor. He waited, blinking. "So, can you fix it like you usually do?" I finally turned my chair toward him. "That's under finance's scope. I've forwarded it to Lisa. She'll handle it." Peter's eyebrows shot up. "You always handle these things." "I've been advised," I said evenly, "to focus on my assigned responsibilities. I'm demonstrating that I understand my proper place in the organization." His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded stiffly and walked away. By lunchtime, the ripple had started. Questions pinged my inbox, half of them things I used to fix before anyone even noticed a problem. A supplier misread a purchase order. That was procurement's issue now. Client call rescheduled without notifying marketing. Not my lane. Every time I hit forward, I felt lighter. Not vindictive, not smug, just free. At 5:00 p.m., sharp, I shut down my computer. Claire was still in her office, probably assuming I'd be there another 2 hours. I walked past her door without a word, the click of my heels steady and deliberate. On the drive home, I silenced my work phone. Dinner that night was grilled salmon and roasted vegetables eaten at the table instead of in front of a glowing laptop screen. Afterward, I curled up on the couch with a book I hadn't touched in months. Around 8:30, my phone buzzed. Work number, then another, and another. I turned it face down. The company had survived before I worked there, I reminded myself. They could survive one evening without me. By the time I went to bed, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. I stood by the window for a while, watching the reflections ripple in the puddles. This was only day 1, and something told me they hadn't even begun to realize what was coming. The next morning, I didn't rush. I didn't grab my laptop before breakfast or skim through overnight emails while my coffee brewed. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, enjoying every bite of toast and the quiet hum of the neighborhood waking up. By the time I walked into the office again, exactly 9:00 a.m., I could feel the difference in the air. There was a low-level tension like static before a storm. Claire's door was shut, but through the glass I could see her on the phone, gesturing sharply with one hand. 2 members of the client services team hovered outside like kids waiting for the principal. I took my seat, powered up my computer, and started on my own project queue, nothing more, nothing less. It didn't take long for the first crack to show. At 9:40, Lisa from finance appeared clutching a printout. "Rachel, do you have the updated implementation notes for the Carter project? We can't find them in the shared drive." "They should be there," I replied without looking up. "Check the client integrations folder. I documented everything last quarter." She sighed. "We tried, but there's too much in there. Can you just walk us through it?" "I'd love to help," I said, "but that's not in my current task list. Those notes were designed for anyone to use." Lisa hesitated. "Honestly, no one understands them the way you do." I gave her a small smile. "Then maybe someone should start learning." She left, muttering something under her breath, and I returned to my work. By 10:15, Peter had shown up again, this time with a worried look. The Brighton projections got sent to the client before we corrected them. "They're asking questions." I raised my eyebrows. "That's unfortunate. Did finance get back to you?" "They're still trying to sort it out. But you're the one who—" "I'm not anymore," I cut in gently. "It's in their scope now." He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's just, we've never seen it this messy." "Maybe the mess was always there," I said quietly. "You just never had to look at it." By noon, the tension had thickened. A scheduling conflict with a major supplier was now spiraling into missed deadlines. Normally, I would have stepped in, sent the right emails, smoothed the tempers, reset the timeline. But I simply forwarded the chain to procurement and kept typing. That afternoon, Claire finally emerged from her office. "Rachel, can you join me in the conference room?" I followed her in, where 2 account managers sat looking like they'd been caught in the rain. Claire wasted no time. "The Jensen proposal is falling apart. They've asked for specific metrics and projections by tomorrow morning, and no one can locate your old templates. They're in the shared drive, I said evenly. Folder marked proposals, metrics. It's all there. Claire's lips tightened. We've looked. There's too much material and no one can tell what's current. Then maybe, I said, meeting her eyes, it's time someone else learned how to keep it current. Her gaze flickered frustration, maybe a touch of disbelief, but she didn't argue. Fine. Just see what you can do for now. I shook my head. I have 2 deadlines of my own today. If I finish early, I'll check in. The meeting ended there, the room charged with unspoken tension. Back at my desk, I noticed the looks, curious, skeptical, some even approving. Word was spreading, Rachel wasn't the fixer anymore. At 5:00 p.m., sharp, I powered down. My phone buzzed in my bag as I walked to my car, but I didn't touch it. On the drive home, I thought about how strange it felt, this deliberate restraint. For years, I'd been the one to swoop in and save the day. Now I was letting the day save itself. Or not. That night, I made dinner with my sister, something we hadn't done in months. We laughed over burnt garlic bread and cheap wine, and for the first time in a long while, my mind wasn't half anchored to an inbox. By the time I went to bed, there were already 14 missed calls from the office. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Whatever was falling apart could wait until morning, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The following day, I arrived at 9:90 a.m., sharp again, coffee in hand, and strolled past a cluster of employees whispering outside the break room. Their eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away like they'd been caught discussing something they shouldn't. I didn't have to guess what it was. My absence from the usual firefighting had already become office lore. Before I even sat down, my work phone lit up with 3 missed calls from Claire. I set it face down on my desk and opened the compliance report I'd scheduled to finish. 10 minutes later, she appeared in person, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. Rachel, she said, voice tight. The Hallstrom client is furious. They wanted their implementation changes by noon yesterday, and no one has been able to complete them. They said you're the only one who understands how it works. I kept my expression neutral. All the documentation is in the integration folder. They've looked. It's hundreds of pages. That's why there's a table of contents, I replied. Her eyes narrowed. Can you just handle it, please? I glanced at the clock. I have the quarterly compliance review this afternoon. If you want me to handle Hallstrom first, I'll need you to sign off on moving that deadline. She hesitated clearly, calculating which disaster was more pressing. Without another word, she turned and left, muttering something under her breath. By 10:30, the office felt like a pressure cooker. Emails were flying, phone calls were going unanswered, and the hum of printers had been replaced by the sharp tap of frantic typing. I worked steadily on my assigned tasks, letting the chaos swirl around me. At noon, I stepped out for lunch, a real lunch, not the 15-minute gulped sandwich at my desk I'd been accustomed to. I sat in the small park 2 blocks away, eating slowly, watching a group of kids chase each other around the fountain. The sunlight felt warm on my face, a sensation I realized I'd missed for months. When I returned at 1:00, the tension had only worsened. Peter intercepted me halfway to my desk. Rachel, we've got 3 clients threatening to cancel. Marketing's in meltdown because they can't find your last ad performance breakdown, and IT says there's a permissions issue only you can fix. I met his gaze calmly. Then marketing and IT will need to do their jobs. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't get it. No, Peter, I cut in. I get it perfectly. You've all gotten used to me being the shortcut, but that shortcut isn't free, and no one ever noticed until now. He stared at me for a moment, then shook his head and walked off. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of muffled arguments from conference rooms and the constant ping of emails marked urgent. I finished the compliance report on time, sent it to the regulators, and shut my laptop at 5:00 on the dot. Driving home, I thought about how quickly the cracks had appeared. Years of patching holes had given everyone the illusion that the walls were solid. Now that I'd stepped back, the truth was showing through. That evening, my sister called. How's the grand experiment going? She asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Better than I expected, I said. They're scrambling. And you... I glanced at the glass of wine in my hand, the half-prepped dinner on the counter. I'm fine. More than fine. We talked for another half hour, and when I hung up, I realized I hadn't thought about work once during the call. It was like a muscle I was learning to relax after years of tension. Before bed, I checked my phone just once, 27 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, and nearly 50 emails. I didn't open a single one, because tomorrow I knew the real fallout would begin, and I was ready to watch it happen. By the time I walked into the office on Thursday morning, the air was electric with panic. You could feel it in the clipped voices, the hurried footsteps, the way people avoided eye contact like they were afraid I might read the desperation in their eyes. I set my bag down, sipped my coffee, and opened my calendar. Nothing on the schedule except a project review I'd been chipping away at all week. I'd barely logged in when Claire's assistant appeared at my desk, slightly out of breath. Rachel, the executive conference room. Now. Inside, Claire sat with Robert Hale, our regional director. His salt and pepper hair and perfectly tailored suit gave him a presence that usually filled a room. Today, though, his expression was a mixture of frustration and something else, relief. "Rachel," he said, motioning to the empty seat. "Thank God you're here. We need your help with Hallstrom and 2 other accounts that are now at risk. You're the only one who understands the systems well enough to fix this." I glanced at Claire, whose tight smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's generous," I said, "but you've both made it clear I'm adequate. I've been focusing on my assigned role." Robert leaned forward, ignoring the jab. "What will it take for you to fix this? Name your terms." I let the silence stretch for a moment. "I've been contacted by another company. They've offered me a senior position, higher pay, greater authority, full recognition. Apparently they think I'm more than adequate." Claire's jaw tightened, but Robert's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Are you leaving?" "I haven't decided," I said, "but I'm weighing my options." "Whatever they're offering," Robert said without hesitation, "we'll match it." I shook my head. "It's not just about money, it's about respect, opportunity, and being heard. I've built relationships with these clients. I've created the systems your teams run on. And yet..." My voice trailed off, letting the weight of those years hang in the air. Robert exchanged a glance with Claire before speaking again. "If I offered you a new role, Director of Operational Strategy, reporting directly to me with double your current salary and full hiring authority, would you stay?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked at Claire. "And what happens to my current department?" Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. "That would be your call." I turned back to Robert. "Then I have a condition. I'll only consider it if Elaine..." I stopped myself, deliberately correcting if Claire remains in her role. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to fix a system that's been broken for too long." Robert studied me for a moment, then nodded. "That's unexpected and smart. I'll make it happen." The conversation shifted back to the crisis at hand, but I barely heard it. I could feel the dynamic in the room shifting under my feet. For the first time, they were treating me as essential, not replaceable. As the meeting wrapped up, Robert said, "I need an answer by Monday morning. In the meantime, please stabilize these accounts. No one else can." I gathered my notes and stood. "I'll do what I can within my hours." Walking back to my desk, I caught sight of the ripple effect. Conversations hushed when I passed. People moved out of my way in the hallway. It wasn't deference exactly, it was awareness. They knew I was holding the threads together, and I was choosing which ones to pull. Before diving into the Hallstrom file, I looked straight at the camera above my screen, the one connected to our remote team calls, and thought about you, the one hearing this story now. If you've ever had to decide between walking away from everything you've built or staying to fight for what you deserve, tell me in the comments. I want to know because the choice I was about to make would change everything. I spent the rest of that morning combing through the Hallstrom account. The problems were obvious: deadlines stacked on top of each other, miscommunications between departments, and zero understanding of the custom processes I'd built. It was like watching someone try to assemble a puzzle without knowing what the picture was supposed to be. At 11:30, I dialed into a video call with the Hallstrom team. Their project manager's voice was strained. Rachel were on the verge of pulling the plug. No one seems to understand what we actually need. I leaned back in my chair. That's because they're trying to hand you a generic solution. You don't need generic, you need something built for your operations. There was a pause. Then the Hallstrom director said, "Exactly. And frankly, you're the only person who's ever made us feel like this company listens." I walked them through a phased plan, fix the most urgent issues in days, then roll out the remaining changes over the next 2 weeks. I kept my tone calm, but deliberate, knowing that every word was buying back a sliver of trust. By the end of the call, the tension in their voices had eased. "This is why we signed with your firm," the director said. "Because of you." When the call ended, I didn't dive in to do the work myself like I once would have. Instead, I documented each step in plain language and sent it to the implementation team. "Follow this exactly," I wrote. "If you get stuck, I'll clarify. But I will not be redoing your work." At $200, I knocked on Claire's door for our scheduled meeting. She looked different, pale or tired, like the past few days had aged her. "Close the door," she said. I sat. "I understand Robert offered you a new position." "He did. I'm not thrilled about it, but I understand why. You're valuable to this company." She hesitated, like the next part was harder to say. "I owe you an apology. I've relied on your competence without recognizing it properly." I studied her for a moment. "When you said I wasn't ready for senior leadership, what did you think I was lacking?" She shifted in her seat. "You've always been more behind the scenes. Senior leadership requires visibility, political presence. In other words," I interrupted, "I do the work while others take the credit." Her cheeks colored. "That's oversimplifying." "Is it?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Who created the proposal that saved the Hallstrom account last year?" "You did." "And who presented it to the executive team?" "I did." We sat in silence for a moment. Finally, she said, "Are you going to take Robert's offer?" "I haven't decided," I replied. "If you stay," she said slowly, "things will be different between us." "Yes," I said, standing, "they will." Leaving her office, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't about personal vindication anymore. It was about redefining how this place worked, whether I stayed or not. That evening, I didn't check my work phone once. I cooked dinner with my daughter Emily, and later we sat on the couch watching her favorite old sitcoms. She leaned against me, laughing at a punchline, and I realized this was the first week in years I'd been home every night by dinner. I thought about Robert's offer, about Claire's apology, about the way the office had shifted since I stepped back. For the first time, I understood something critical. Sometimes the only way to show your worth is to stop giving it away for free. And Monday was coming fast. My decision would have to be made. The weekend came like a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Saturday morning, Emily bounded into the kitchen with her hair a wild halo, clutching the museum brochure I'd promised her months ago. "You said we'd go when you had time," she reminded me. "I did," I said, ruffling her hair, "and I have time now." The Science Museum was alive with noise kids darting between exhibits, parents trailing behind with coffee cups in hand. I let Emily lead the way, her small hand gripping mine as she tugged me toward the planetarium. For once, I wasn't glancing at my phone between moments. I was there. Really there. Sunday was slower. I called my sister Julia while stirring a pot of chili. I told her everything: Robert's offer, Claire's apology, the chaos at work. "So you have two choices," she said. "A fresh start somewhere else, or a promotion that could put you above the person who underestimated you." "I'm not looking for revenge," I said quickly. Julia chuckled. "Are you sure? Because it sounds like part of you would enjoy seeing her face the day you signed that contract." Her words sat with me longer than I expected. I pictured Claire's expression when Robert offered me the director role. The tightness in her jaw, the way her eyes flicked between us. I hated to admit it, but there was a certain satisfaction in the thought of her having to answer to me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept turning the options over in my head. Leaving meant a clean slate, no baggage. Staying meant power, the kind that could be used to rebuild the system from the inside. Monday morning came with a cold, clear sky. I arrived at 7:30 a.m., the way I used to before all this began. Robert's assistant wasn't at her desk yet, but his door was open. "You're early," he said, looking up from his laptop. "I wanted to give you my answer before the day gets busy," I said, taking the seat across from him. "I'll accept your offer with two conditions." His brow lifted. "I'm listening." "First, I want full hiring authority for 3 positions I believe are essential. Second, Claire stays where she is." His eyebrows rose even higher. "After how she treated you, because replacing her doesn't fix the structural problem, and I don't want my first leadership act to look like a vendetta." He leaned back, studying me. "That's unexpected, and politically smart." "Very well. Claire stays, but her department will now coordinate through your office for all operational matters." We shook on it. By 10 a.m., the company-wide email went out. "Effective immediately, Rachel Morgan has been promoted to Director of Operational Strategy, reporting directly to the Regional Director." My inbox exploded with congratulations, questions, meeting requests. Peter appeared at my desk looking sheepish. "So, you're my boss now." "Technically, yes," I said. "Is that a problem?" He shook his head. "No. Honestly, it makes sense. You've always been the one who actually knows what's going on." Through the day, colleagues who had barely acknowledged me before found reasons to drop by. The admin staff smiled knowingly. They were the ones who'd always understood the invisible work. Claire didn't approach me until late afternoon. She set a folder on my desk. "Quarterly strategy document." Since operational planning's now under you, you'll present it at the executive meeting tomorrow. I nodded. Thanks, I'll review it tonight. She turned to go, then hesitated. For what it's worth, I didn't block your promotion because I thought you were incapable. I did it because I couldn't afford to lose you from my team. I met her gaze evenly. That's the problem, Claire. Good managers develop their people even when it means letting them go. She gave a single sharp nod and walked away. And as I gathered my things to leave, I knew this was only the beginning of the real work ahead. If you've ever been put in a position where staying meant fixing what broke you, I want to hear your story. Leave a comment, because sometimes sharing the choice is as important as making it. That night I didn't celebrate. I stayed in the office after most people left the hum of the HVAC filling the empty space and began reorganizing my workspace for the role ahead. My old desk felt too small for the plans I had in mind. I opened a folder from my personal drive, a document I'd been quietly refining for nearly 2 years. It wasn't just a plan. It was a blueprint for an entirely new way of running our operations, a training program to identify overlooked talent, cross-departmental workflow improvements, and a system for capturing institutional knowledge, so no one person became a single point of failure like I had been allowed to become. As I reviewed it, the thought struck me I'd been ready for this long before they offered it. The only difference now was that I finally had the authority to make it happen. Byron Roberts' first name, which I could now use without feeling out of place, passed by my desk on his way out. He stopped when he saw the open documents. Still here, I thought you'd be home celebrating. I smiled. I'll celebrate this weekend. Right now, I'm planning how to make sure no one else here is overlooked the way I was. He stepped closer, glancing at the document. You developed all this today. No, I admitted. I've been working on it for years. I just never had permission to implement it. He shook his head, impressed. Remind me never to underestimate you, Rachel. That's the plan, I said. The next morning, I called a meeting with the 3 people I wanted for my new team. None of them were on the radar for promotions. One was a systems analyst buried in IT support tickets. Another was a process coordinator doing double the work of her peers without recognition. The third was a junior account manager with a talent for building client relationships, but stuck handling administrative busy work. When I told them why I'd chosen them, they all had the same reaction, a mix of disbelief and relief. I've been here 4 years, the analyst said quietly. No one's ever asked me what I actually want to do. That changes now, I told him. Over the next week, we began auditing workflows across departments. It was worse than I'd thought: duplicate processes, outdated documentation, responsibilities no one wanted to claim. And everywhere we went, the same thing happened. People opened up when they realized we weren't there to assign blame, but to fix problems. Claire and I crossed paths often. We kept it professional, almost cordial. She excelled at the client-facing parts of her job when freed from the operational details she'd never mastered. And while we weren't friends, there was a mutual acknowledgement that we were both doing what we were best at. 3 months and the changes were undeniable. Overtime dropped by 40%. Productivity metrics rose across 4 departments. The Hallstrom account not only renewed, but expanded their contract. The systems we put in place meant no single person held all the keys. Walking into the break room one afternoon, I overheard 2 admins talking. It's like the whole place runs smoother now, one said. And she did it without making it about her. I smiled to myself. That was exactly the point. The work wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but every improvement felt like another brick laid in a foundation that would outlast me. And for the first time in years, I could picture a future here that didn't involve me burning out quietly in the background. Because now I wasn't in the background anymore. I was where I'd always belonged, out in front, building something that mattered. 6 months after stepping into my new role, the office didn't feel like the same place I'd walked into that Thursday morning when panic first broke loose. The buzz of chaos had been replaced with an energy that was calmer, more purposeful. People moved with intention. Departments actually talked to each other instead of lobbing problems across the hall like grenades. One crisp fall morning, I arrived to find a small gift bag on my desk. Inside was a handwritten card. Thank you for noticing me. It was signed only with an initial, but I knew who it was, a quiet data specialist from marketing, whose ideas had been dismissed in meetings for years. She'd recently led a cross-team project we'd launched under the new program, and it had exceeded every target. Moments like that reminded me why I'd chosen to stay. Claire's department had adapted too. Once she was no longer buried under operational headaches, she flourished in client presentations and negotiations. We'd never be close friends, but we respected each other's lanes now. She came to me with ideas, and I listened. I offered her structural support, and she didn't fight it. One afternoon, I was reviewing quarterly metrics when Byron stopped by. "Rachel, you've got a call from Hallstrom's CEO. He wanted to speak with you directly." The man's voice boomed through the line. "I just wanted to say your team has been phenomenal. The operational turnaround has been remarkable, and your people get it. We're expanding our contract again, and we want your team leading the integration." After I hung up, Byron gave me a rare smile. "That's the third time a client has called me just to praise your work." It was satisfying, but not for the reason people might think. This wasn't about proving Claire wrong anymore. It was about knowing that the systems we'd built were working, visible proof that recognition didn't have to come at the expense of collaboration. That evening, I left right at 5:00, a habit I'd fiercely protected despite the heavier title. Emily was waiting at home, math homework spread across the kitchen table. "How was work, Mom?" she asked without looking up. "Productive," I said, setting down my bag. "We launched a new training module today. 25 employees are going to get development opportunities they wouldn't have had before." She paused, pencil hovering. "Like you didn't get—" Her words caught me off guard. "Yes," I said slowly, "exactly like that." She thought for a second, then shrugged. "That's a nice way to fix things. Instead of getting mad, you're making it better for other people." I smiled, realizing she'd captured the heart of it in a single sentence. The truth was, the old me might have taken the promotion as a personal victory, a way to finally claim the corner office and the title I'd been denied. But the person I'd become saw it differently. The real win was creating something that could outlast my tenure, ensuring that no one else with the skills and drive I'd had would spend years invisible. I thought about the first day I decided to step back, about the satisfaction of letting the cracks show. That had been the start. But this, watching people rise, seeing them recognized, and knowing the company was better for it, this was the real payoff. And in a way, it was the best kind of revenge, not by tearing anything down, but by building something better in its place. Winter settled over the city with early sunsets and a sharp wind that rattled the office windows. Inside, the atmosphere was warmer than it had ever been. Teams that once eyed each other with suspicion now shared updates openly. Meetings ended with action plans instead of finger-pointing. The changes weren't perfect, nothing ever is, but they were real, and they were sticking. One Friday morning, Byron called me into his office. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the skyline. "Rachel," he said, turning toward me, "the board's been reviewing departmental progress. They're impressed." I waited, letting him get to the point. "They've approved your promotion to Vice President of Operations effective next month. Unanimous vote." His mouth quirked upward. Claire actually gave the strongest recommendation. For a moment, I couldn't speak. After years of being overlooked, to hear that the same person who once dismissed me as adequate had backed my advancement, it was almost surreal. "That's unexpected," I finally said. "People can surprise you," Byron replied. "And I think she's come to see the bigger picture." Walking back to my office, I thought about what this meant. Not the title itself, though it was gratifying, but the message it sent, that change was possible, that even the most entrenched systems could shift if you refused to play by their unspoken rules. That afternoon, I called a meeting with my team. "I have news," I said once everyone had gathered. "I've been asked to step into the VP role next month, and I want you to know this: none of it would have happened without you." The systems analyst grinned. "Guess that means you're buying lunch." "More than lunch," I said. "We're going to plan the next phase. The work we've started isn't finished, it's just getting bigger." After the meeting, I took a moment alone at my desk. I thought about the day I'd walked out of Claire's office with her rejection still ringing in my ears, the moment in my car when I'd decided to let the cracks show. I'd wanted them to see my value by watching the absence of it, and they had. But along the way, I'd also seen my own value clearly, without needing their stamp of approval. Late that evening, when the office had emptied, I sat by the window and watched snow swirl under the streetlights. My phone buzzed, an email notification from the channel where I'd been quietly sharing career strategies since all this began. One message stood out. "Your last post made me rethink my own job." I asked for what I'm worth, and I got it. I leaned back, smiling to myself. The reach of this transformation was bigger than our building, bigger than my title. And before we move further, I want to pause here with you. If you've ever stood on the edge of a choice, whether to walk away or stand your ground, share your story in the comments. Sometimes, the smallest decisions made in the quiet can become the turning points we remember for the rest of our lives. Because the truth is, the moment that changes everything doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like a simple, deliberate step in a different direction, and the courage to keep walking it. The Monday after my VP promotion was announced, the ripple effect was immediate. My calendar filled with meeting requests, some from department heads looking to align strategies, others from employees I barely knew who wanted to introduce themselves. It was almost comical. A year ago, most of these people wouldn't have looked twice at me in the hallway. Mid-morning, I found a note slipped under my office door. "Thank you for making space for people like me." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. It belonged to one of our junior project coordinators, who under the new training program had just led her first company-wide initiative. It struck me then that what we'd built was bigger than me. The systems were working without my constant oversight. The new leaders we'd developed were solving problems before they reached my desk. That I thought was the true test of leadership, when things keep running smoothly, not because you're holding them together, but because you've built something that can stand on its own. That afternoon I passed Claire in the hallway. She stopped. "I read your latest quarterly strategy proposal," she said. "It's impressive. You've got a knack for seeing things the rest of us miss." I studied her face, trying to gauge how much of that was genuine. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we'd moved past the silent battles of the past year. She knew her strengths, I knew mine. We could work side by side without tripping over each other. Later, during a leadership meeting, Byron gave me the floor to present the results of our operational changes. As I laid out the metrics: reduced overtime, increased client retention, faster project turnarounds, I could feel the shift in the room. They weren't just hearing numbers, they were recognizing the strategy behind them. When the meeting ended, Byron clapped me on the shoulder. "You've changed how we think about this company," he said. That evening, as I packed up to leave, I caught myself lingering at the door. A year ago, I would have stayed another 3 hours chasing perfection. Now I could leave at 5:00 without guilt. Emily was waiting at home, and that was just as important as any contract or metric. Driving through the quiet streets, I thought about how far I'd come from the woman who sat in her car after being told she was adequate to the one shaping the future of an entire company. And I realized something: I hadn't just reclaimed my worth. I'd redefined it on my terms. Before I end this part, let me tell you, if you've ever felt unseen, undervalued, or underestimated, I want you to share it below. Not because you need validation from me, but because your story might be the one someone else needs to hear tonight. We all start somewhere, and sometimes where we start is exactly the place that underestimates us the most. The first quarter in my new VP role felt like stepping into a different world. Instead of putting out fires every hour, I was mapping the terrain, seeing where the company had blind spots, where talent was underused, and where processes could be reimagined entirely. My days weren't easier, but they were purposeful in a way they had never been before. One of my first major initiatives was rolling out the talent development program I'd dreamed about for years. We started with 25 employees from different departments, people who were good at their jobs but invisible in the hierarchy. The goal wasn't just to train them, it was to give them the tools and visibility they needed to shape their own careers. On the first day of the program, I stood at the front of the training room and watched them filter in. Some looked curious, others skeptical. I remembered what it felt like to be in their position, unsure if anyone would ever see the value you brought. "I know what it's like to work hard and still feel unseen," I began. "But I also know how quickly things can change when someone gives you the chance to prove yourself. This program is your chance." The weeks that followed were intense. We paired participants with mentors, rotated them through cross-functional projects, and held weekly strategy sessions where they could present their ideas directly to senior leadership. At first, the presentations were hesitant, but by the third week, I was watching people stand taller, speak with confidence, and own their expertise. Outside the program, my team continued streamlining operations. We automated repetitive tasks, reorganized workflows, and set up a shared knowledge base that ensured no one person held all the critical information. It was the exact opposite of the culture I'd inherited, one where power came from hoarding knowledge. Now power came from sharing it. Claire adapted to the new structure better than I'd expected. Without the weight of operational chaos on her shoulders, she leaned into her strengths, winning over clients, negotiating contracts, and representing the company at high-profile events. We still weren't close, but there was an ease between us that hadn't existed before. One afternoon, she stopped by my office. I saw the schedule for the training program's final presentations, she said. Mind if I sit in? I considered it. Not at all. Just be ready to take notes, you might see some ideas worth stealing. The day of the presentations felt almost ceremonial. Each participant had 15 minutes to pitch a process improvement or growth strategy. Some were modest tweaks, others were bold overhauls that made the executives sit up straighter. By the end, the room was buzzing. When the last presentation ended, I looked around at the group. Every one of you has just proven something important, not just to the leadership team, but to yourselves. This isn't the end. It's the start of a career that you control. That night, as I was leaving, Byron stopped me in the hallway. You know, he said, when we created your role, I thought it was about fixing operations. But it's more than that. You've changed the culture here. Driving home, his words echoed in my head. Changing processes was one thing. Changing how people thought about themselves and their work, that was the real legacy. And I knew we weren't finished. We'd only just begun to see what could happen when people were finally given the chance to be seen. Winter was settling into the city, and with it came a quiet sense of renewal at the office. My role had transformed from crisis manager to visionary strategist, and the difference was palpable. Teams that once struggled to communicate were now collaborating seamlessly, and a new wave of leadership was emerging from places I'd long overlooked. One chilly morning, I walked into the conference room to find a few of my rising stars gathered around a whiteboard, brainstorming ideas for an upcoming client pitch. Their energy was contagious, eager, confident, and fully invested in the company's future. It was a far cry from the isolated, invisible workforce I'd once been a part of. As I listened to their ideas, I realized something profound. By empowering others, I'd multiplied my own impact. I wasn't just fixing problems, I was cultivating leaders who would carry the company forward long after I was gone. Later that week, Byron called me into his office. Rachel, the CEO of Ellison Enterprises, personally requested to meet you. He said, his voice tinged with excitement. They want you to lead the expansion of their account. This is a major vote of confidence. Meeting with Ellison's CEO was both exhilarating and humbling. He praised the operational turnaround and specifically highlighted the training program's success. Your leadership has been transformative, he said. We're not just renewing our contract, we're expanding it to include 2 new service lines. Walking out of that meeting, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work we'd done wasn't just about fixing what was broken, it was about building something better, something sustainable. That evening, I arrived home to Emily's excited face. Mom, guess what? I got an A on my science project. Her joy was infectious, and as we sat down for dinner, I realized how much more present I'd become in her life. The long hours and endless stress of the past felt like a distant memory. After dinner, Emily looked up from her homework and said thoughtfully, You know, it's like you didn't get your chance before, but now you're helping other people get theirs. I smiled, touched by her insight. Exactly. Sometimes the best way to fix things is not to fight fire with fire, but to light a new candle. Later that night, as I reviewed the presentations for an upcoming executive meeting, my phone buzzed with a message from Byron. The board has unanimously approved your promotion to Senior Vice President, effective next quarter. Congratulations. Claire sends her regards. I set the phone down, a deep sense of satisfaction washing over me. This wasn't about titles or corner offices, it was about finally being seen for what I'd always been capable of. And more than that, it was about changing a system that had failed me and countless others so that no one else would have to go unnoticed ever again. If you've ever felt invisible in your workplace despite carrying more than your share, I hope my story gives you courage. Because the skills that make you indispensable are the same ones that qualify you for leadership. Remember, your worth isn't defined by others' inability to see it. It's defined by your impact, whether acknowledged or not. And if this story resonated with you, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's keep sharing these journeys, empowering each other to be seen, to be heard, and to lead. The months following my promotion to Senior Vice President were filled with new challenges and opportunities, but also with a deep sense of fulfillment. The company wasn't just running better, it was evolving. The culture was shifting from one of silent struggle to open collaboration, and I was proud to be at the center of it. One of the most rewarding moments came during a town hall meeting when an employee who had once been sidelined stepped up to share her story. She spoke about how the new training programs had given her confidence and a voice, and how for the first time in her career she felt seen and valued. Hearing her words made every late night, every difficult conversation, and every moment of doubt worth it. It was a reminder that leadership isn't about power or prestige, it's about lifting others up. Still, the path wasn't always smooth. Old habits die hard, and some colleagues resisted the changes. There were moments when I had to navigate office politics, carefully balancing the need for progress with the realities of human nature. Claire and I found a new rhythm in our working relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was respectful. She excelled in client relations while I focused on internal operations. Our roles complemented each other, and together we formed a leadership team that was stronger than the sum of its parts. Outside of work, I made a conscious effort to reclaim my personal life. I set firm boundaries around my work hours, making sure that evenings and weekends were reserved for Emily and myself. The guilt that used to accompany leaving the office on time slowly faded, replaced by a sense of balance I hadn't experienced in years. One evening, as Emily and I were preparing dinner, she looked up from her homework and said, "Mom, you're not just a boss, you're a teacher. You're teaching people how to believe in themselves." Her words hit me harder than any compliment from the boardroom. In that moment, I realized that the legacy I wanted to leave wasn't just about policies or profits, it was about the people I helped grow. If you're watching this and feeling unseen or undervalued, remember this: your journey matters. Your quiet strength, your persistence, and your courage to demand recognition can change not only your life, but the lives of those around you. I encourage you to share your story in the comments. Let's create a community where voices once ignored are finally heard. Together, we can redefine what it means to lead and to be valued. And if this message resonates, please consider subscribing. Let's keep building a space where everyone's worth is acknowledged and celebrated. Because sometimes the most powerful change begins with one person deciding to be seen. Years ago, when I first stepped into the office as a fresh-faced analyst, I never imagined I would be standing here today, leading a department shaping company culture and building a future where no one else would feel invisible. The journey from being overlooked to being heard wasn't easy. It required more than just hard work. It required courage, strategy, and most importantly, the decision to stop accepting adequate as an answer. I still remember the moment that changed everything, the day I was told I wasn't ready for promotion, despite years of dedication. Instead of accepting that verdict silently, I chose to show my true value by stepping back, letting the cracks appear, and forcing the company to confront the reality they had ignored for so long. That choice set off a chain reaction that transformed not just my career, but the lives of countless others. The training programs we launched have opened doors for employees who once felt trapped in the shadows. Our new systems have made operations more efficient and sustainable. And perhaps most importantly, the culture has shifted from one where invisibility was the norm to one where recognition and respect are expected. Of course, change is never linear. There were setbacks, tensions, and moments of doubt. But every challenge was a lesson, a reminder that leadership is as much about resilience as it is about vision. Today, as I prepare for the next executive meeting, I feel a deep sense of responsibility. Not just to the company, but to every person who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or undervalued. My role is to ensure that no one's contributions go unnoticed, and that every voice has the chance to rise. If you've ever felt like your talents were invisible or your efforts overlooked, know this: your worth is not defined by others' recognition, but by the impact you create. Don't wait for permission to shine. Create your own spotlight, build your own stage, and demand the respect you deserve. And if my story has inspired you even a little, I invite you to join this journey. Share your experiences in the comments, connect with others who understand your struggle, and together let's build a world where no one is invisible. If you believe in the power of recognition and the courage to stand up for yourself, please subscribe to the channel. We'll continue exploring stories of resilience, empowerment, and transformation, because everyone deserves to be seen. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't proving others wrong. It's creating a world where talent can no longer be ignored, no matter how quietly it performs. Thank you for listening. Your worth is real, your story matters, and this journey is just beginning. As I sit here reflecting on this journey, I realize that success isn't just about titles or paychecks. It's about reclaiming your voice when the world tries to silence you. It's about turning moments of rejection into fuel for transformation, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. This story isn't unique to me. Many people feel invisible at work, overlooked despite their hard work and dedication. But invisibility is a choice we no longer have to accept. When we step back and let the cracks show, we give the system a chance to repair itself, to grow stronger and fairer. I learned that leadership isn't about fighting for the spotlight, it's about lighting the way for others. The true victory is creating a legacy that empowers those who come after you, building a culture where every voice is heard and valued. So, to anyone watching this who feels unseen or undervalued, your worth is undeniable. Don't wait for someone else to recognize it. Stand firm, claim your space, and show the world what you're truly capable of. If you've found hope or strength in this story, I encourage you to carry it forward. Share it, live it, and be the change you want to see. Because when one of us rises, we all rise together. Thank you for being part of this journey. Remember, your impact matters, your story matters, and your time to be seen is now.